It's time to start your morning by taking 5. Here's your host, Matt McMaster.
You're listening to Take 5, a quick 5-minute take on the biggest things happening in Nebraska sports. I am your host, Matt McMaster, and today we are talking about Nebraska versus Penn State, NBC, 6 o'clock, Happy Valley. The Huskers trying to move to 8 wins for the first time since 2016. They're 7-3. They take on the 4-6 Penn State Nittany Lions, who have had probably the most disappointing season in all of football this year. They entered the year projected to be in the Big Ten championship game. They end up firing their head coach after 6 games this season after their loss to Northwestern. And they just picked up their first Power 4 victory of the year last week in November. If I told you that in November, hey, Penn State won't win a game against a Power 4 team until the middle of November, you would have been like, what? How the heck did that happen? Like, who got hurt? And so this has been a very disappointing year for Penn State. But they still have life. They had a ton of fight when they went ahead and they played Ohio State. They had a ton of fight when they went ahead and they played Oregon. They won last week against Michigan State. Katron Allen was phenomenal in that game. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But I was really shocked to see what the opening line for this game was. Right now, Nebraska football is a 9.5-point underdog against Penn State. And, I was anticipating after Penn State's win and the fact that they're still fighting for bowl eligibility, that they would be, maybe a 3.5 to 5.5 point favorite. I'm not a professional handicapper, but just off of my experiences, I think, all right, that might be a fair line. Nebraska isn't great at stopping the run. Penn State's got some capable running backs, and they're on the road, Happy Valley at night. But 9.5 points, 9.5 points kind of articulates that it could be a blowout. 9.5 points articulates that Penn State is the way better team and that they're going to control the entirety of the football game. And 9.5 points is so high that it kind of piques my interest a little bit in, am I looking at this game wrong? Am I looking at these teams wrong? Am I underestimating something for Penn State? Am I overestimating something for Nebraska? Am I not properly, maybe viewing this in the right lens? Because, let's take a couple of steps here. I think the key on offense, obviously, for Nebraska is you got to go ahead and you got to make sure that TJ Lateef is comfortable. You have to have a good game plan for him. You have to use his strengths. You have to do some of the similar things that you did against UCLA, but you're going to be doing it against high competition. So maybe that's a factor of, hey, TJ Lateef hasn't played a defense this good as a starter. Can Nebraska score enough points, right? So maybe that's one aspect to look at it. The second aspect to look at maybe why this line is so high is when it comes down to the rushing attack of Penn State versus the rushing defense of Nebraska football. Now, we've beaten this like a dead horse. Nebraska football is not good at stopping the run. All right, just plain and simple. They have not been a good run-stopping team, and we've seen it kind of in different games right throughout the year. The Michigan game, it was apparent. In the USC game, at times it was apparent. It was very much apparent in the Minnesota game that this team, it's really difficult to win in the trenches. And so you look at Penn State, and first off, let me offer, Nebraska's 94th in the country in opponent rushing yards per game at 170. They're 126 out of 136 teams in expected points added against the rush. This is a running back duo in Penn State that has been disappointing. Nick Singleton, let me read you from the Oregon game on down. 1.9 yards per carry, 3.5 yards per carry, 2.9 yards per carry, 2.5 yards per carry, 3 yards per carry, 7.1 yards per carry. That was on 10 carries against Indiana, and 3.7 yards per carry. This is a guy who had a little Heisman buzz heading into the year, who is considered one of the better running back in the country, and season he's averaging under 4 yards per carry, 3.9. Now, a guy that you do have to look out for, though, is Katron Allen. Allen had 181 yards and 7.2 yards per carry against Michigan State. He is averaging 5.6 yards per carry, and Penn State is a team that they're not going to be afraid to run the ball. They ran the ball a ton against Indiana. Katron Allen had 19 carries, like I mentioned before. Singleton had 10 carries. Allen had 25 carries against Michigan State. Singleton had 15 carries against Michigan State. I mean, this is a team that if you're not going to be able to stop the run, they're going to pound the rock. And so it's going to boil down to, can Nebraska step up? Can this defensive line, who's young and inexperienced, can they finally take a step? Can they go ahead and not allow Penn State to control this game? Can TJ Lateef, can another young guy, can he develop? Can he take another step? Is an extra week of preparation good for his development and good for Dana Holgorsen? These are questions that we have to ask ourselves, right? And so I think what Nebraska, I want to throw this out here. Nebraska's had a defensive rushing problem the entirety of the year, okay? They have not been able to fix it. They have not been able to solve it. Regardless of what they've done, it just seems like teams, are just able to run the ball kind of whenever they want. Now, not everybody, right? But teams that are capable, and Penn State is a team that's capable of doing it, have been able to get a lot of what they want on the ground. But they're still 7-3. And this is a Penn State football team that is 4-6. This is a Penn State football team that has lost at home to teams that Nebraska has beaten. Nebraska beat UCLA. Nebraska beat Northwestern. Nebraska has proven this entire year to be a better team than Penn State. And so while the spread is high to me, while it raises the alarm of, can this rush defense step up? While it raises the alarm of, can TJ Lateef take the next step as a young quarterback starting only his second game of his career? While that all sounds the alarm, just face it from this perspective. Nebraska football has dealt with this problem, with this rushing defense problem all year, and yet they've still been able to win 7 games. Yet they've still been able to be victorious against Big Ten teams. Yet they've still been able to make big plays, whether it be on offense, whether it be in the fourth quarter, whether it be on special teams, to win games. And so while, a 9.5-point spread against a team that you thought it would be way less than, it does irk you a little bit because Vegas knows a lot about football and knows a lot about these teams. To me, it's just, these are kind of the same storylines we've been dealing with, and Nebraska has dealt with those storylines and have dealt with those problems and still been able to beat teams that have proven to be better than Penn State. So, am I on edge? Is the light bulb on? Is the siren sounding? Maybe just a little bit. But is this going to be a blowout? Do I think Nebraska is going to cover 9.5 even if they don't end up winning this game? Yes, I do. So, curious line. Maybe it raises a couple alarm, but I'm not buying it. Nebraska's had these problems all season, and while they've given them troubles, it still hasn't stopped them from winning games against better teams. So that's been Take 5, and I've been Matt McMaster.